Welcome to Own Your Breath, a sacred container to your authentic self. I'm your host, Ryana Yusuf. By sharing of real, raw, honest experiences, expertise, and ideas from my guests and myself, together we will learn to embrace the full experience of being human. Through love, connection, and breath, let's release shame and welcome the unique beauty and strength of being authentically us. Welcome. Hello everyone. Welcome again to Own Your Breath. With me today is Fiona McKinnon, all the way from London. How are you, Fiona?
I'm good. And as you said, take a breath, own your breath.
Yes.
I just started with a little breath with you there. So I'm great. It's nice to see you. Thank you for having me along.
Actually, part of my slogan, I'm not sure if I sent it to you, is embracing the complete human experience through love, connection, and breath.
So important.
Yes.
All three of those things.
Thank you for joining me, Fiona. I know you are a very busy woman. I watch you over LinkedIn, so many activities. So Fiona is a co-founder of Moment Company. And Moment Company principle of background stories it's really, really aligning to me. It's all about mindfulness, which I'm huge about. And so tell me, Fiona, how or why did you found it Moment Company?
Yeah, so you're right. At Moment Company, we're on a mission to help people reduce stress, burnout, and anxiety by simply sharing really quick, effective ways that we can use mindfulness, meditation, and breath work to really kind of help us control our emotional state and our stress throughout the day. So we're not about saying you need 20 minutes either side of your day to meditate, headphones in, eyes closed. We really want to share that there are so many little things that you can do throughout your day that done regularly can really make a big difference. Like consciously breathing, like, just practicing some mindfulness when we're brushing our teeth, when we wake up. And there's so many different things that we can go into that we just want to make the benefits of all of those as accessible to everybody as possible, which anyone who knew me 10 years ago would wonder, how on earth are you doing that, Fee? Because I certainly was not that kind of person in my previous career. And actually, I was probably one of those skeptical people. I even found yoga classes kind of annoying because I was all about doing CrossFit and training for marathons and, that whole cliche we have in the corporate world of you have to be crushing it and smashing it, and if you're not working 24/7 then you're not working. And so that was very much my background.
I love
which I'm sure a lot of people will relate to.
Yes. Thank you for being so raw and so real. I absolutely love this because I'm doing stress management for corporate, right? So I'm trying to stress. I'm trying to make them unlearn this culture of what you just described and relearn how much more productive we can be if we actually take a moment.
Oh my goodness. And you touched on something there, which you said culture.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of my biggest learnings that now I reflect back on what got me to where I am today. Culture is a big part of it. And so I spent 20 years in the digital media industry, and I predominantly worked for startups, which meant that it was 24/7. You rolled your sleeves up, you did whatever you needed to do to make the business a success, and it was a lot of fun. And it was a lot of hard work. And I was lucky enough to have a career that was global. So I lived in Europe, I lived in Australia, North America, Canada, LA. and all of my teams were global. So I knew pilots, I was always on airplanes, and it looked really glamorous. And, you know, I'd be in Mallorca one weekend and New York the next. And when I actually lived in Melbourne, and it was great for a period of time until it wasn't anymore. And I didn't have the awareness in myself or my body to understand that I was suffering from burnout and stress. And, you know, you mentioned culture.
Yeah.
There was also a real culture of, well, you just get on with it. You're not really able to say no. There was that toxic environment of, you know, working late, competitive lateness. If you're not the last person in the office, then you must be doing something wrong. And sort of your whole life wasn't celebrated, only the work part was celebrated. Yes. And I just didn't physically and mentally have the strength to understand what was going on for me. So it took extreme physical burnout where my immune system was just completely shot, my cortisol and adrenal function, you know, I was so depleted that my body just gave up, and I physically had to stop for 6 weeks and do absolutely nothing. And it was that point where I realized that I couldn't continue on the lifestyle that I previously had, which was my version of wellness, which was extreme exercise, working 24/7 and drinking lots of vodka martinis. And funnily enough,
sounds familiar.
That led to burnout.
Sounds so familiar. Yeah. And
you know, but if you're not in an environment where people are talking about how they're feeling, but they're just talking about, you know, hitting numbers and growth, and you know that somebody else is waiting in the wings to take your job, then you just don't ever express how you're feeling, but you also don't say no. So, hey, Fee, do you want to go and just, you know, do a course in New York for a week, and then you need to be here 2 days later, and can you just fly there? And I just said yes. I didn't know that I had an option to say no. Yeah. And that, to your point, comes down around to that culture and how are teams rewarded? What are the behaviors that are seen as positive? What's the language that's used in a business to celebrate people's success? And also, you know, the softer skills that we all have and show up with, is there room for those to be rewarded? And it's not all just about revenue numbers. And I think I learned a lot in that period about good, bad, and really ugly versions of culture. Yeah,
I totally agree. What do you think? So do you think this culture, right? Like we have to be doing this, keep on moving, keep on doing, is also because we attach our worthiness to this, right? Anything less, we feel unworthy, you know, so and because it's outside, it's external, so the race is endless, you know, we just keep on chasing the next high. You know, we just keep on going, oh, she works 12 hours a day, I think I'm going to work 16 hours a day, something like that, you know. Yeah, but really, our worthiness is really, it's inside of us. What we think of ourselves has nothing to do with outside.
But you're so right. And that is, you know, that is the ultimate skill. That is the you know, they call it the work and the practice. When you're able to see that and feel that, then it just completely changes your life. It took me 8 years, I think, to kind of realize that. But at the time, you're right. And I would say particularly women, we put a lot of emphasis on the reward and recognition coming from and validation coming from our work input. I feel, and you know, speaking from my experience, we tend to lead with an apology of why we're there, or, oh, I'm sorry, I just needed to, and oh, I'm sorry, I had to, you know, pick the kids up from school, or whatever it was. And there's almost that leading with an apology, when actually that woman who left to pick up our kids probably was on the laptop until 11 o'clock at night to make up, when actually nobody's noticing. And I think it's that kind of we need to focus more on outcomes rather than time spent. And I think COVID has really helped with that, because now everybody can work from home, or a lot of people still are. It's about what are you bringing to the business? What's the outcome of your role? How are you showing up, as opposed to how long are you spending in the office? Did you go for drinks after work? Because there's that other side of that pressure as well, of that social culture, when actually some people aren't comfortable with that. People want to go home and enjoy their family, and that's what's really important to them, which then makes them more productive when they're in the office, because that other part of them has been fed appropriately. But that's one good thing I hope we take out of our COVID hybrid working, is that ability to celebrate the whole person, and not just, as I say, working late and pure revenue numbers.
Absolutely, I totally agree. However, in Singapore, I noticed, so during the lockdown, the well-being, suddenly go up, went up, right? The importance of it. But recently, I could see since last year, since there's more opening up, losing up of rules, I can tell it's changing back to the old culture. So let's just hope, they realize it sooner than later, before they crash like we did. But look at us now, spreading the word, trying to, to be the defense from other people falling off.
Yeah, and I think, you're absolutely right. This is the prime time to be having these conversations in the workplace. I can't think of a more apt time. And there is a social and economic and, a workplace, an employer commitment that's required to look after the well-being of the people that they employ and they're looking after, because there's absolutely no question that investing in the health of your employers make for a better business. There's so many different surveys on the ROI of £1 spent on investment, or $1, whatever it might be, what you get back. From a UK perspective, 30% of all lost time in the workplace last year was due to stress. That equates to £4 billion of lost productivity just through stress. But then stress is the trigger for other types of illness, and then those kind of longer term issues as well. And it also doesn't necessarily address churn, employee satisfaction. So there might be low productivity and not just absenteeism and time off for sick. So it's a huge issue. But what I'd say is that there isn't a one fits all silver bullet solution for that. And that's why, from our perspective, we're really interested in looking at different ways of learning, different ways to engage with people, and different types of techniques and tools, because we're all different. We all have different stress triggers, which means we all have different ways to manage that. And we also have, different time commitments. Some of us like sound, some of us like a more tactile product, some of us like breathing, some of us prefer mindfulness. So we try to cover as many of those different positive traits as possible, so that people can find what really resonates for them. And I know that was my personal journey. So when I suffered from the burnout, someone gave me The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle, and I was just like, no, it's too much. I don't get it. I can't understand it. My mind is blown. I'm not ready for this. But it just created enough curiosity for me to start to find things that did. So for me, it was Abraham Hicks, Marianne Williamson, Brene Brown, who talks beautifully about vulnerability in the workplace. Love
my idol,
Me too. Ariana Huffington on the importance of sleep and rest. Like they're my kind of, Sean Aker talks about the power of happiness. And those were my kind of key entry points and discovering that. And then I took up transcendental meditation. So a friend of mine had been doing it, and she said, B, I promise you this will change your life. I didn't realize just how much, but I started doing that, and I have been doing it every day for 5 years, and she was not wrong. And one of the things that a regular meditation practice did for me was also lead to my sobriety. So I've been 3 years now sober. Next month.
I was about to ask you that. Yeah. But your previous, I mean, through your, your whole lifestyle, all this business, surely there's also some kind of coping mechanism you had before. And then there you go. Yeah, you're telling me, yeah.
As I said, like before, extreme exercise and drink. So I had to work out every day. I had to sweat every day. I had to do that. It was more mental than physical release, but it was something that I just found like I got a chance to breathe. And it's interesting when you think about exercise because it makes you breathe deeper. It makes you regulate your breathing. And just moving your body and being more connected to how you feel is really important. So physical exercise was super important to me, but I also partied really hard. And don't get me wrong, I had a lot of fun. But when I started to realize I was using it as a way to cover up things, I was actually really shy. I'm actually really shy, believe it or not. And I hated like having to stand up and speak. I hated having to go to parties. I hated having to do all the entertaining side of my job. So I drank to cover up, but then that would make me anxious because I would drink too much and then wonder what I'd done. And then I was caught in this kind of fear, anxiety, introvert kind of loop that really made me unhappy. And I didn't appreciate it until I started meditating, that I could feel good and calm and stable and actually happier if I stayed away from alcohol. And so now it's just not, it just doesn't enter my head anymore. And honestly, Ryana, I am the first person on the dance floor, the last person to leave the bar now, and I'm happier, so much happier not drinking. And I know that's just my personal story. I'm not here to say everybody needs to stop drinking. I'm just saying this is what worked for me. And I think it's important to note that drinking does numb your senses. It gives you that instant hit of, release, like exercise, which, some people turn to in times of stress, but you think we also turn to it in times of celebration. We turn to it for everything, which means we're also dumbing down the good stuff as well. So now I feel
that's a very good point,
more, but I also feel the highs more, which is great. So that's what I kind of reward myself on, is that, yay, I feel everything more, which includes the good stuff too.
That's true. I suppose, in other words, you're more present now to your emotions,
That's it. Yeah, you've got it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then you become more aware of things like your language, how you listen, how you can be triggered by things, and just by making very small changes to how you speak to yourself, because you're the person that you speak to most out of anybody else in the world, 60,000 times a day. We have a little conversation with ourselves, and 80% of that is negative. Right? So if we can just change a little bit of that negative to a positive, it makes the world of difference, because that's the neuron pathway that you're strengthening and building for tomorrow. So you repeat more of the positive and less of the negative. And I found that has had a huge impact on how I feel about myself. Again, we talked about that kind of, how you show up in those boundaries. It means that I have them now. I'm okay with saying, I don't want to do that. That doesn't feel right to me. And that just comes from practicing those things, seeing how they feel as you experience it.
Do you still have the guilt? Like in the beginning, when I started practicing saying no, I mean, I was exactly like you. When I say yes, I don't really mean yes. It's just a habit of saying yes. But now that I've been saying no, I will have some sort of guilt. Do you still have it?
Let me think. Let me feel that.
Yes, take your time. And if you do, how do you shift from it?
I would say in general, I probably don't feel that guilt anymore. Obviously, there are some situations, and this is the thing, this is the practice. And when people start their mental fitness journey, it's a bit like your physical fitness. You don't get to peak fitness on day one. It's the fact that you're going to the gym regularly and you're trying different things and you're lifting different weights or you're going faster. That's what builds up your endurance. And it's the same for your mental fitness. So I don't think you ever fully get there, wherever there is, but you just become more aware of it and you can react to it more, but you're reacting from a place of thoughtfulness rather than reacting to the emotion that's being triggered. So I feel less guilty about pleasing myself because I feel that is where my happiness comes from. And I've begun to correlate the two things. It's slow, it's work in progress, but I can feel that the more I'm true to how I'm actually feeling, the less those negative emotions arise. But when they do, I'm more able to recognize them. And quite often I'll sort of sit and go, ooh, I feel that way. What is it about what I have just said, committed to, thought that doesn't feel right? And then I kind of ask myself the questions about why it feels wrong.
Curiosity. You get curious instead, right? Instead of judging the situation, and instead of going down that toxic spiraling down into that hole, this time, that space before we react, there's this small gap, this space where we choose to be curious, we choose to be mindful, and then that's where we take a detour before.
That's absolutely it. And that, after all, is what mindfulness is. It's just being present 100% without that judgment and without that reaction. And so the more you practice that, and you know, it literally is a few deep breaths. And that's enough to create the space that you talked about, just to think, okay, I'm not going to jump in here. How do I actually feel? And it literally can, your body reacts to those couple of deep breaths just to calm your heart rate, and then you just got that little bit of space for more clarity. And that really is the foundation of moments, and Moment Company is exactly what you just described there. Everything else we do thereafter, whether it's a mindfulness practice, a gratitude journaling, a meditation, a movement, that all comes after. You've taken those deep breaths, you've created that little bit of space, and you've thought, okay, what next?
I strongly believe that our breath is our home. It's the essence of life. It's like, I have this word that I printed a sticker, but I haven't pasted it anywhere. Breathe to safety. You know, and so I'm a meditation teacher. So I always said, whether in meditation, whether you're starting telling stories in your head, or whether it's outside, when you're in chaotic moment, just connect back to your breath and just continue breathing and come back to safety. You know, and you ground yourself, and that's your anchor, because really only us can make ourselves feel safe again. It's not easy. It's taken us years, but any progress is progress. And like you said,
and it really is. It really is. The small steps over time add up to make a big difference. It's exactly what happens. You don't do one guided meditation session and you're enlightened for the rest of your life. It's how you build the awareness in your body, the awareness of your language, mindfulness into your day, that you'll really start to feel the difference. And you know what, so I had been through my burnout journey, physical burnout. I'd been curious, I'd started reading, I did meditation. And my other co-founder, Alex, had been on a similar journey. His his burnout was mental. So he lost his short-term memory. He talks about writing, potentially getting tattoos everywhere to remind him to breathe, to remind him to kind of, take a moment for himself, because he knew that was the thing to do, but it's just remembering to do it throughout the day that was his challenge. And so, we connected through a mutual friend who knew that I'd been on my journey, that he'd been on his journey, and we have a third co-founder, him also. His was through grief. And we just have this lovely complement to how we all ended up being burnt out. And then all the things that we did to put ourselves back together again. So we're all NLP coaches, generative coach. I trained in Reiki because I really believe in kind of healing power and spiritual side of things. And so between us is this wonderful mix of modalities that starts with the breath, starts with mindfulness, but then there's lots of other things that are practical that we can bring into our day that we want to share with people as well.
Yeah, that's what I really, really like about your company. You use simple, sustainable modalities, and which is so important. So even when I teach, especially for corporate companies, that's what I do. Keep it simple, and because what's the point if you complicate? You do a lengthy one and they can't do it. It's too overwhelming.
I think it's important when we go into corporates as well that we don't just tell, it's important to me that there's a balance of the science, because there's going to be people that are very skeptical. I don't believe that breathing well makes a difference to me. There will be those people. That's great. That's their held belief. However, science, physiology tells us otherwise. So we like to show people and make it experiential so that they can feel the difference even in just 5 minutes. And we make all of the exercises under 5 minutes and something that is easily to be recalled. So we do a coach NLP meditation. We have a 1, 2, 3 practice, which is a minute of breathing, 2 minutes of mindfulness, a 3-minute meditation. We have 20 connected breaths. So all of these things are very, very simple, but they can be extremely powerful in under 60 seconds. Your body physically feels the change, which then sends that signal to your mind, hang on a minute, something happened there. So we want to just make people feel first and then be curious to learn more. And that's really the goal.
I agree. Yeah. I have this thing, I have a very simple that I prime, when I teach, you prime your day and you end the day with the same thing. And one of it, to just start breathing 8 times, just 8. I said, keep it 8.
Perfect.
Yeah, set an intention, 5 gratitudes, off you go. And keep that practice, and then gradually then you increase, And so in many ways, I really, really resonate to what you say. Yeah. Pretty
I would
much.
say
please.
Sorry, I was just going to say that our biggest difference and where the business started when I joined it was that we have a physical device that we use to help embed our practices. I
was just going to ask you actually.
Perfect timing. Yeah.
So, I'm always curious about your pebble. I love the shape, and I saw the box on LinkedIn. Was it today or yesterday? Love it. Yeah.
Yeah. So my co-founder Charlie, he was suffering from stress, burnout. He back in I think about 2016, he had 3 children under a year. He had twins and then a girl in very short succession. And he lost his mother, and he had his own business, and everything just felt quite overwhelming. So he started to use Headspace, which he found was really helpful in the mornings and evenings. But he was finding that he was losing that practice and things were getting on top of him during the day. So Andy Puddicombe had said in his Headspace app, if you can find an object to sit with or to act as a reminder for your meditation, it really helps anchor the practice, and it helps with recall. And actually, you may only have to see it to be able to kind of recall some of those emotions, in the same way that emotional attachment theory is we all have a favorite mug that feels comforting when we drink our tea out of, or a piece of jewelry or a photograph or something sentimental. It kind of brings up an emotion.
Yeah.
So Charlie set out to find something that was on the market that he could purchase that would help him with that. And there was nothing. And so he started to think about time spent with his mother and the things that, the keepsakes that they had and the things that felt like that emotional attachment. And he had this pebble that he'd taken off the beach in Cornwall when they'd been kids, or like when he'd been with his mother. And it just felt really comforting and grounding.
Yeah.
And so that's where the idea to create Moment Pebble came from, where it was important that it was something that felt nice and tactile. It was something that felt grounded in nature, but it was a little bit magical and that was guided. And so this is our Moment Pebble, and this was the box that you mentioned. So we wanted this to be a moment in itself, so it has a lovely, satisfying slide.
I love it. I'm that person who's so into packaging. But even the shape of your rock. So to be honest, I mean, I actually meditate with amethyst pebble, which is smaller. However, I do wish that it is slightly bigger. And honestly, your size is perfect.
So yeah, and so it's interesting you say about crystals, because quite often when I get out my pebble, someone will pull and it's often people I don't expect will pull a crystal out of their pocket, and be talking about how that's a comfort for them. So again, this is known practice. These are things that are familiar to us. And yeah, that's great. Like to have crystals, and it's the same kind of concept of having something that feels soothing.
However, I have to say, I mean, I love that crystal thing, but I have to say I do like yours because yours will prompt us.
Yes. So
because we forget, like, let's be honest, I meditate once a day, and then we need to be prompted for our breathing. So
the pebble itself, I'm in front of a big window here, but it lights up when you tap it, so it's glowing there right now. So you can see that. And you breathe with the light, and the light takes you through a cardiac coherence breathing technique of 5 in, 5 out. And within 30 to 60 seconds of that breathing sequence, it's enough to have created that physical change in your body and to have slowed your heart rate down and to put it into a more coherent rhythm. You simply tap it to switch it off again. But it's also that physical, tactile. So I actually use it quite often just as something to hold, to kind of get
as an anchor.
As an anchor. It means that children can pick it up and really understand it very intuitively as well. But simply seeing it is enough, or just remembering to breathe when you reach for it, or being in the corner of your eye on your desk is enough to act as that mindset circuit breaker that we all need sometimes when we get those spiral of thoughts or perhaps a stressful moment. So all of that kind of is encompassed in having a tactile reminder of your mental wellness. And then the pebble itself comes with a 4-week self-paced program where we introduce you to everything from journaling, emotional attachment theory, lots of guided meditations, a yoga sequence, theory of mindfulness. So we just introduce different types of things that you can do with your pebble over 4 weeks.
Nice, very nice. I need to get hold of one of these.
We ship to Singapore, so that's not a problem.
I'll look into it. Yes, you did mention that. So you've pretty much actually covered, it's fundamental, I would say fundamental aspect of mindfulness, I like, the reason why I like mindfulness, it's not complicated, but it's so effective. And you've actually described it, simplify it, over 4 weeks of learning, and then over, I don't know, half an hour or something.
Yeah, it's something I'm extremely passionate about. It really is. And, you know, I always say my best testimonial is me, because I came from such a skeptical career, global exec, drinking type background, the complete opposite of what I am now. And
right.
I just know what it's done for me, and the power of just making those small steps of understanding the language that I use, and maybe changing one word in a sentence can just have such a powerful impact.
When I mean, I've been hearing you repeating language, right? Changing language. Can you quote an example? In your case, what have you changed in your language compared to before to now?
One of the first things that I tried, and I'm now very conscious of, is replacing the word but with and. And it was actually an old CEO of mine mentioned it. And by changing that, you completely change the sentiment of what you're saying, but you haven't lost any power. You haven't, you know, you're still saying the same thing, but you've just said the same thing, and you've made the person feel better. So there was a great example, but wasn't needed there. By saying and, it's almost like a double positive, so you can reframe how something comes across. And what I really began to notice was the more I changed what I said, the more I got a different response back, because the person hearing you is receiving a different feeling and emotion to the words that you're using. And so you just begin to notice that your relationships become easier and conversations become more impactful because you're using more thoughtful language.
I love that. So I'm one of those people who I would like to think I've decreased using but I was always using but. And then I asked, I think you remember, Justin, we have a common, Justin introduced us, right? So I was telling Justin, I'm always using but, and I don't want to use but because I don't really meant it that way. So then we were thinking, and he said, however. So I shifted to however is good, but now this is even better. And
however still sounds like you were making a point before, and means you're adding something to it. It's additive. It's more than. However,
I really like it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the biggest thing. And honestly, I will be completely vulnerable with you right now. Something that I started doing this year, but I really, honestly, some people might be completely turned off by this. It's made the biggest difference to me. I say I love you in the morning to myself. And as crazy as that sounds, I feel it's made a difference, because you're reassuring yourself. You are your biggest cheerleader. You certainly should be. And I feel that's made a difference. So, positive chat. And I am not that kind of person. I'm not gushy, like, that's not me at all. But I just thought it was important to share that with you, because it's something that I've done that I feel has made a difference.
Thank you. Yes, I agree. It makes me feel less lonely now. I don't actually say I love you every day, but I mean, I'm going to admit, I meditate, but there are days that I probably meditate maybe 5 times a week. Like I probably miss about 2 days. Usually I'm trying to have a proper every day. So what I do is I stare at the mirror and I say kind words to myself. That's one of my, I do few deep short meditation practice, but combined together. So one of the things that I teach in some of my classes is saying I love you to the mirror. And like you, I know people think, this mambo jumbo, Ryana and her mambo jumbo again or whatever. But here you go from Fiona McKinnon, and that's such a great reminder, Fiona. Like, I'm going to do that. I'm going to tell you, because I have to sit in front of a mirror, things like this, but perhaps I don't. I'm just going to tell myself I love myself every day, and that's more easy, doable.
And, you know, if you're not comfortable in saying it to yourself, like it literally just came to me one day. I think I don't even know, it just came up into my head. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've said that to myself. Sometimes I say it, but I kind of just send it out from my heart to anyone. I'm not thinking about anyone in particular. I'm not even necessarily saying it to myself. I'm just saying it. And there's something releasing about that. There's something, you know, if you're not comfortable saying it to yourself, you can imagine someone that you're saying it to, and they don't have to be with you in the room, but you can just send that energy out. And again, it's just another positive thing that you're starting to say to yourself, which does physically make a difference to your brain and your body and your emotions. And the other thing that I do every night without fail is that I write a gratitude journal. And I just write, I am grateful for, and it could be as simple as my morning coffee and that the sun's shining. And that's it some days. Other days, if I've had a really rubbish day, I can find lots and lots and lots of things to write about. And when my dad passed, that was the thing that I did to help reframe negative days into positive. So it means the last thing that I'm thinking about when I go to sleep are things that I'm grateful for, which is another positive. And so that's something that I do every single day as well. And you know, and my last one that I'll mention, which is actually Mel Robbins. You know, Mel Robbins, the author. So I listened to her, and she does a technique where she high fives in the mirror. Yeah. And so I do that. I've just remembered this morning when I did it that I'd let it slip for a few days, but again, no judgment. I just get on with it. And you high five, because that action sends a signal to our brains that says, yay, well done. There's like a positive action to it. When you high five someone, or when you high five a kid, they go, yay. They don't know why you're high fiving them. There doesn't need to be a transaction. There doesn't need to be, I'm doing this because. We do that to each other and we get an instant endorphin hit. So we get the same when we do it to ourselves. So I give myself a high five in the morning too.
I love it. I read her book, but I haven't started doing it yet. But yes, I'll give it a shot. So, this I love you. Actually, years back, there's an elderly woman, like she's in her 70s, told me, this was during the part where I was struggling, depressed, burnout, drinking too much, all these things. And she told me, Ryana, you are a good person. Just tell yourself, I love you every day. And at that time, I couldn't comprehend it. You know, I'm like, but I do love myself. She said, no, sweetheart, you don't really. But she don't explain much. But I'm like, what she's talking about? I do love myself, you know. But years later, a decade, 8 years or 10 years later, I totally know what she meant. And I think today we are talking for you to remind me of saying this, I love you to myself, or whatever. But I particularly...
she was right. And
absolutely, yeah.
But it's seen as being, oh gosh, I mean, I have been to the opposite end of that scale. And when I reflect back now on my burnout, yes, I always say it was physical, but I'm kidding myself if I don't say it was mental as well. And I literally walked down with my head down for years, where I would get up in the morning and I would tell myself I was disgusting, I was repulsive, why would anybody love me? I was awful. Like I had this awful narrative that I woke up and told myself every single day. And now I look back and I wonder, why did I feel bad? Well, it's because I was getting this abuse from myself all day long. And it was learning meditation and mindfulness that helped me break that cycle. And it was slow. But I can remember to this day, the first day I lifted my head up and I saw someone smiled at me as I walked down the street because I'd lifted my head up. And I was just like, oh my gosh, there's been this whole world out there this whole time. And I haven't been part of it because I've been stuck in my own head and my own thoughts. And so even if that feels too much of a stretch for anyone that's listening to say I love you, one, you're not being conceited by doing that. It's really important that you look after yourself and that you value yourself. And so just even if you can change a little bit of the negative to a positive, you will get there over time. You definitely will, and it just makes such a big difference.
Thank you so much, Fiona. I think you've covered the main point: breathing, being mindful of the words we choose, and I love you, and high fives. I love these 4 pointers. Where can we find you? On Instagram is Moment?
Yeah, we're at momentcompany.co on Instagram. We do twice weekly live check-ins. So if anybody wants to join us for some breathing on Fridays and Mondays, we're there. But there's hundreds of reels to catch up on if you just want some breathing exercises. And our website's momentcompany.co as well.
Love it. Thank you so much again for sharing your story and how you found it. It's very inspiring. And I'll be sure to join you one of the days for your live, your Instagram live. I actually done once with Alex.
Great. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. I could talk to you all day. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.